And we're back one-on-one with Randy Young from Friends of Veterans Canada. Now, you've been collecting tape. Well, the kids have been collecting tape, and you've been collecting some as well.
Yes.
But some of the stories, I mean, are you sitting there screening this stuff? Tell me a couple of the stories that have made an impact on you when you saw the storytelling.
Well, one of the more important stories I think that history needs to know is the story of the Canadian natives that were part of the D-Day landing, where they spoke the Cree language on the beach. I was speaking with Vern Westhaven out in Halifax, and he mentioned to me, he said, "Have you gotten any stories on the native code talkers?" And I said, "What do you mean, the American ones?" And no, these were Saskatchewan Cree Indians that spoke their language on the radios, so the Germans couldn't tap on to our secrets. And I found it so interesting that I contacted the Native University out there in Saskatchewan, and now they're actively seeking out stories from their veterans for the history of the Native people.
Because you're right. I mean, it's folklore in the U.S. about some of their World War II fighters who used the native language to evade the Germans. But I can't recall ever hearing about that on the Canadian side, especially on the D-Day landings. But that'll be an interesting part of it all. Another one.
I actually tried to find some of the stories when I was traveling out to the West Coast. We've traveled over the whole country over the past 2 years to spread the word about the National Video of Veteran Contest and the Harry Watts Veterans Video Library, where all the stories are held. And I've heard so many stories, and so many great stories, that one in particular strikes me is Vaughn Boyne again, from the Halifax area. Actually, he was from Fredericton, I think. Yeah, Fredericton. And he told me about when he was actually in the artillery. So he was a spotter. So he had to go out ahead of the artillery to spot and find where the bombs were going to land, or the artillery was going to land. And he got caught out in the field out there with a buddy of his, and bombing was happening, and he was close to death. So he wandered out into the field because he thought he'd seen a buddy of his out there, and he gets out there. And this man was not a religious man to start with. And he got out into the field, and he swears he's seen an angel out there that told him that he needed to get back to his area and move his friend away from where they were. So he did that, and he got to his friend, and he moved him around. He goes, "Did you see our friend out there in the field?" He goes, "I didn't see nothing." So he actually thinks in his head that he's seen an angel out there that day that saved him and his friend's life that day. And now that man is religious. They say there's no atheists in foxholes, and I think that's true.
We tend to, and we shouldn't, but we tend to think back at World War II stories all with men in them.
Yes.
You've been logging some stories of Canadian women who were involved as well. Tell us about that.
Well, one in particular strikes me, Elaine Hale from it was in the East Coast, Moncton, New Brunswick, and she was an entertainer. She worked at Guy Lombardo and seen all the big names in the day. And after the stories, and she showed me pictures, and I recorded her story. At the end of it, she says, "You don't believe I was an entertainer, do you?" And I believed her, but she said, so she actually did a soft shoe right in the living room for me with a little it was fantastic. And I couldn't leave that house without a full course meal and a glass of wine after dinner. And you sure you don't need a place to stay? And people in this country are so open to history and to passing on history. And I think if we don't take advantage of this living history that we have right now with our veterans that are still alive from the World War II in Korea, we're really doing our country a disservice. So people should get their video cameras out and get Grandpa and Grandpa's story.
You're capturing a lot of different emotions, obviously, in some of the stories that you're hearing. Are the veterans careful about not glorifying what happened?
Well, at the end of all our videos, we always ask the veteran, if you have anything to say to the young people about your time in the war or about war itself, what would you say to those kids? And to the 200 stories out there that we've gotten so far, that they all say that war is a bad thing, and if there's anything you can do to influence your government not to be in a war or get into a war, that's what you should do. Of course, there was one exception to that. He was an RSM in Ottawa, and he struck to the party line, and it was war is necessary and we need to do it, and that kind of thing. But I'd say on the most part, most are very not sympathetic, but more willing to pass on that information about not getting into war.
Has that surprised you?
It did in a sense. It did in a sense because, you know, and I also must mention, I asked those same guys that say, you know, there should be no war, if they would go back again. And to a man, and a woman, they all say yes. I would join up again if my country needed me.
Yeah, I think they all, at least the ones I've talked to, all understand the need that was there for them in their situation. But they're blunt and frank about the horrors of war, and that the young kids have got to understand that this isn't, you know, it's not like in the movies.
Yes, sir. Well, we had one story where a corporal was leading his soldiers. Newton was his name. He actually passed away before he could actually win the contest because his video actually won.
And I was one of the lucky ones.
He mentioned that they were wandering into a minefield, and he said that there was 3 prongs sticking out of the ground, you know, and you had to watch it. And they had already wandered into the minefield. And he said the way they found out was that his buddy, his close friend right beside him, blew up, and he said there was nothing left of him. It was just, he was gone. So yes, war is a horrible, horrible thing. And I think if you talk to any of our veterans that are currently in Afghanistan, they'll tell you that, you know, war is war, but I'm fighting for the guy or the gal beside me so we can both get home safely. I mean, war is taken on a different kind of context now with with not knowing who your enemy is. I mean, in World War II in Korea, you pretty well knew who your enemy was.
How's it impacted the kids? What are they saying about this experience?
Well, I tell you, the kids are so they're so apt to join into another club or into say the Air Cadets or the Navy League or Navy Cadets or Army Cadets or Boy Scouts or Girl Guides or Brownies or whatever, because they see that there is a camaraderie amongst soldiers, and maybe they can capture a little bit of that with the Girl Guides and Boy Scouts and that type of thing.
We're going to take our final break. We'll be back one-on-one for final thoughts with Randy Young right after this.